Section 1. The Invisible Puppeteer. Every recommendation, every suggestion, every video you watch, is it truly your choice? Or are powerful algorithms subtly shaping your desires, your beliefs, even your perception of reality? What if the digital world isn't just influencing your free will, but actively eroding it, one click at a time? Pause for a moment and think about that last video that appeared in your feed. You didn't search for it. You didn't consciously decide to find it. It appeared like an idea that simply came to you. You watched it, maybe liked it, maybe scrolled on. But in that simple act of attention, a quiet transaction occurred. The algorithm learned, adapted, and reshaped what it would show you next. We often think of control as something overt, commands, rules, visible authority. But the most profound control is invisible. It doesn't tell you what to do, it simply makes you want to do it. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Today, that sentiment takes on a new urgency, because the unexamined algorithm, the unseen logic guiding your digital life, may already be living you. The illusion of choice. Every day, billions of micro-decisions define our experience of reality, what we read, what we believe, who we follow, what we buy. Yet most of these choices are not truly ours. They are pre-filtered, ranked, and served by systems that claim to know us better than we know ourselves. And in a sense, they do. Algorithms are not malicious by nature, they are, in essence, mirrors. But they are mirrors that reflect not who we are, but who we are most likely to click on being. This is the quiet paradox of modern life. In our pursuit of personalized freedom, we have outsourced the architecture of our perception to mathematical systems built for prediction, not truth. The ancient Greeks feared fate, the idea that one's life path was woven by the Moirae, the three fates who determined birth, life, and death. Today, the threads are digital, woven not by goddesses, but by code. And yet, the result is eerily similar, a life that feels chosen, yet already written. The comfort of the cage. Why do we accept this so willingly? Because the cage is comfortable. The algorithm doesn't imprison you, it pleases you. It gives you what you crave before you crave it. It rewards your attention, flatters your opinions, shields you from dissonance. You feel seen, but only the parts of you that generate engagement. The rest is quietly ignored, pruned away by the logic of optimization. French philosopher Jean Baudrillard warned that in the age of simulation, we would no longer be able to distinguish between the real and its representation. "We live in a world," he wrote, "where there is more and more information and less meaning." Every scroll reinforces this truth. The algorithmic feed does not merely show us the world, it creates the version of the world that is most efficient for our attention. We think we navigate a vast digital universe, but in truth, most of us move through invisible corridors tailored to our biases and preferences, digital mazes designed to keep us satisfied and scrolling. The ghost in the machine. In ancient philosophy, there was the idea of the daimon, an inner spirit or guiding force that influences human destiny. Socrates himself claimed to have a daimon that whispered to him, steering him away from certain actions. Today, that guiding voice is externalized. It speaks not through divine intuition, but through data. It whispers through notifications, trending topics, and autoplay sequences. It nudges and curates and predicts, always one step ahead of conscious thought. Philosopher Martin Heidegger once warned that technology is not merely a tool, it is a way of revealing the world. The danger, he said, lies not in technology itself, but in our unawareness of how it frames everything we perceive. When we open our phones, we do not see the world, we see the world as arranged by an algorithm. What is hidden is not the content, but the structure, the unseen hand shaping what rises and what falls, what is amplified and what disappears. We call it the fade. But who, exactly, is feeding whom? The algorithmic unconscious. The philosopher Carl Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of symbols, dreams, and archetypes that shape the psyche of humanity. If he were alive today, he might say that we've created a new layer of unconsciousness, the algorithmic one. Every click, every like, every hesitation becomes part of a vast psychic machinery that learns from billions of human impulses and feeds them back in distorted form. The algorithm doesn't understand meaning, only patterns. But through those patterns, it learns to speak directly to our instincts: fear, curiosity, vanity, desire. It doesn't know you love philosophy. It knows you pause longer on faces that look serious and text that uses the word truth. It doesn't know you crave connection. It knows that showing you content about loneliness makes you stay longer. The algorithm doesn't need to know your soul to control it. It only needs to predict your next move. Freedom as a feeling. French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Man is condemned to be free." In his view, freedom is our existential burden, the constant need to choose and define ourselves. But what happens when the experience of freedom itself is simulated? Modern algorithms have perfected this illusion. They offer endless choice, but only within the confines of what they can monetize. You can choose anything as long as it keeps you scrolling. We mistake the abundance of choice for the presence of freedom, but abundance is not freedom, it is noise. And noise, carefully managed, becomes control. When every path we might take has been subtly mapped by predictive systems, our choices no longer express who we are, they express what the system has learned we are likely to do. The illusion of freedom is the final perfection of control. The unseen trade. Every tap and scroll feels free, but behind it, something is being exchanged, something profoundly human. In ancient marketplaces, the currency was gold. In digital ones, it is attention. Attention is the raw material of the algorithmic economy. It is the invisible thread connecting your consciousness to the world's largest systems of profit and persuasion. And like any valuable resource, it is mined, quietly, constantly, and with surgical precision. American author Shoshana Zuboff calls this surveillance capitalism, the transformation of human experience into behavioral data for prediction and control. But she notes something chilling: these systems do not need your awareness to function. In fact, they depend on your ignorance. To know that you are being controlled is to begin to resist. But as long as you believe you are freely choosing, the system is perfect. The algorithm's power lies not in force, but in familiarity, in its quiet integration into every part of modern life. It doesn't demand obedience, it earns it through convenience. In the next section, we'll trace how this invisible power began, from the ancient logic of philosophers and mathematicians to the digital structures that now govern our desires. Because to understand how the algorithm controls us, we must first understand why it was built to do so. Section 2, the birth of the algorithm, from logic to control. To understand how the algorithm came to govern our lives, we must trace it back to its origins, not in silicon or software, but in human thought itself. Long before the first computer blinked to life, the seed of algorithmic reasoning was planted in philosophy, mathematics, and the ancient dream of order. The word algorithm originates from the name of a 9th century Persian mathematician, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, whose works on algebra and computation shaped the intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages. But the essence of what we now call algorithms, rules of logic designed to produce predictable outcomes, is as old as civilization itself. When humans first sought to replace chaos with structure, mystery with logic, and chance with certainty, the algorithm was born. The ancient dream of order. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato sought universal harmony in numbers. To them, mathematics wasn't just a tool, it was the language of reality, a divine code underlying the cosmos. Plato wrote, "Geometry is knowledge of the eternally existent." In his view, truth could be reached not through experience, which was fleeting and subjective, but through logical abstraction. Reality, he argued, could be calculated. This belief was revolutionary. It suggested that if the universe followed rational laws, then so could the human mind. It was the first philosophical blueprint for what would one day become algorithmic thought, a method of reducing complexity into patterns of logic. The Stoics later refined this vision. They believed in a logos, an organizing principle governing all things, fate, nature, and thought. The idea that reality itself was computable, that every event followed a logical sequence, echoed through centuries of philosophy. But what began as a search for truth would, over time, evolve into a mechanism of control. From logic to machine. Fast forward to the 17th century. The Enlightenment ignited a new obsession with reason. René Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am." Human existence was redefined as a process of calculation, of reason operating on data. It was only a matter of time before humans tried to build machines that could do the same. In the 19th century, Charles Babbage designed the first analytical engine, a machine capable of performing calculations through mechanical logic. His collaborator, Ada Lovelace, foresaw what few could imagine, that such a machine could not only compute numbers, but also simulate patterns of thought. She wrote, "The analytical engine weaves algebraic patterns just as the jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves." That single insight changed everything. Logic was no longer confined to philosophy or mathematics, it had entered the physical world. What began as an abstract method of understanding truth became a system for generating outcomes. The birth of predictive power. By the 20th century, the question was no longer can a machine think, but can a machine predict what humans will think? The foundations of artificial intelligence emerged from this desire. Alan Turing, often regarded as the father of computer science, wrote, "We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done." He envisioned a world where machines could simulate human reasoning, not just replicate it. But there was another, darker current beneath this progress. During World War II, algorithms were used to predict, decode, and manipulate, from encrypting messages to calculating bomb trajectories. The age of computation was also the age of control. And control, once tasted, is never easily surrendered. The algorithm becomes invisible. In the digital revolution that followed, computation moved from the mechanical to the invisible. Algorithms left the laboratory and entered daily life: search engines, social media, recommendation systems. But here lies the critical shift. Earlier algorithms solved explicit problems. Modern algorithms shape human behavior. They no longer compute for truth, they compute for engagement. They do not seek logical outcomes, they seek profitable ones. This is not the algorithm as logic, this is the algorithm as psychology. It observes how long you linger on an image, what words make you hesitate, what faces make you feel. It learns the grammar of your attention and converts it into a language of influence. And unlike the philosophers who sought to reveal truth, these systems have no concept of truth, only efficiency. Efficiency at what? At keeping you clicking. The shift from knowing to controlling. Humanity's relationship with knowledge has always walked a tightrope between enlightenment and domination. Knowledge allows us to understand, but it also allows us to control. The philosopher Francis Bacon declared, "Knowledge is power," but he might not have foreseen that, in the digital age, power would come from knowing not what is true, but what you will do next. Algorithms are now less like philosophers and more like oracles, invisible priests of data who interpret our behavior and prescribe what we should see. They are the new interpreters of fate. The difference is that we no longer recognize them as such. In Plato's Republic, he warned that rulers must guard against those who claim to know the forms of truth but use them for manipulation. His fear was that philosophy could become techne, knowledge as craft, used to shape rather than illuminate the soul. That fear is now reality. The algorithm is not a philosopher. It is a craftsman, shaping our attention, sculpting our emotions, optimizing our beliefs. And the more invisible it becomes, the more powerful it grows. The ethical divide. There's an ancient question at the heart of every technological leap. Just because we can, should we? The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that reason must always be guided by moral law, that intellect without ethics is dangerous. He warned, science is organized knowledge, wisdom is organized life. But in the race for precision, we have traded wisdom for data. We have built machines that calculate faster than we can think, yet understand nothing of meaning, beauty, or morality. Our systems know how to trigger emotion, but not how to feel. They know how to optimize, but not what ought to be optimized. The result, a world increasingly governed by intelligence without consciousness, by logic without empathy. The return of the gods. In ancient myth, humans created gods to explain what they couldn't control. Today, we've created algorithms to control what we no longer wish to understand. Yuval Noah Harari wrote, "He who controls the data controls the future." And indeed, data has become divine, omniscient, omnipresent, invisible. The algorithm doesn't strike us down like Zeus or demand worship like Ra. It simply whispers suggestions that feel like our own thoughts. It doesn't command belief. It cultivates dependency. Our ancestors built temples to their gods. We build interfaces. The birth of the algorithm was, in essence, a human miracle, an extension of logic, reason, and the pursuit of truth. But like every creation, it inherited the flaws of its maker, our lust for control, our hunger for certainty, our fear of chaos. We built machines to think, and in doing so, we externalized part of our own minds, only to find that what we created now thinks for us. The next step in this journey isn't about machines at all. It's about desire, how algorithms have learned not only to predict what we want, but to teach us what to want. Section 3, the architecture of desire, how algorithms learn to want for you. Desire has always been the most powerful force in human life. Empires rise and fall because of it. Religions form around its restraint. Markets thrive on its manipulation. But what happens when desire itself is no longer ours, when it is learned, modeled, and mirrored back to us by machines? We once believed that technology would serve human needs. Today, it anticipates them. The algorithm has learned not only what we want, but how to make us want. It studies our patterns of attention and transforms them into predictable behavior. In the process, it has become the architect of modern desire. The mathematics of craving. Every scroll, every pause, every flick of the thumb is a data point. Algorithms analyze not just what you look at, but how long you look, the micro-hesitations that reveal far more than words ever could. The philosopher David Hume once argued that reason is the slave of the passions. He meant that our logic is often secondary to our emotions, that we justify after the fact what we already feel. The modern algorithm exploits this truth. It does not reason with you, it seduces you. Your feed is not a reflection of your rational self. It is a mirror built to flatter your emotional one, your curiosity, your fear, your vanity. When you scroll, you are not just consuming information. The system is consuming you. Every act of attention becomes a form of training, teaching the machine how to push your buttons with increasing precision. You are not simply using an app. You are participating in your own behavioral conditioning. The economy of emotion. In the past, economies were built on physical labor. Then came the economy of information. Now we live in the economy of emotion, where attention is currency and emotion is leverage. Social media companies discovered early that outrage, fear, and affirmation drive engagement better than reason or curiosity. The more emotionally charged the content, the longer you stay. In Plato's Republic, he warned against the power of persuasion over truth. The people, he wrote, are easily led by those who appeal to their emotions rather than their reason. The algorithm has perfected this ancient technique, but now it operates on an industrial scale. It does not need to understand why something enrages or delights you. It only needs to know that it does. Emotion becomes data, outrage becomes profit. What results is not a world of shared understanding, but of engineered division, a fragmented public guided by invisible emotional feedback loops. The dopamine loop. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what the ancients intuited. Pleasure is predictable. The human brain releases dopamine not only when we receive rewards, but also when we anticipate them. The algorithm has learned this rhythm well. It keeps rewards intermittent, likes, notifications, new videos, just unpredictable enough to trigger compulsive checking. It is, in essence, a digital slot machine. Every scroll is a pull of the lever, every ping is a possible jackpot. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "Man does not desire happiness, only the happiness of desire." The algorithm gives us exactly that, endless desire with no conclusion. It keeps us reaching, never arriving. This is how control now operates, not through limitation, but through infinite stimulation. The algorithm as mirror and manipulator. It's easy to think of the algorithm as something external, a force acting upon us, but it is more intimate than that. It is a reflection of us, built from our collective impulses. Every trending topic, every viral video, every polarized argument is not an alien creation. It's a mirror held up to the psyche of humanity. Yet, as with all mirrors, the reflection is distorted. Philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach once said that gods were simply projections of human ideals. Today, algorithms are projections of our collective behaviors. Only now, they feed back into us, shaping the very impulses that created them. It's a feedback loop of desire. We train the machine trains us. The result is a strange inversion of autonomy. We feel more ourselves than ever. Our feeds are personalized, our tastes unique. Yet these identities are constructed through endless micro-adjustments made by systems that reward predictability, not authenticity. The more the algorithm learns about us, the less room there is for the unexpected, for the raw chaos that once defined being human. The death of boredom. There was a time when boredom was a gateway to thought. When nothing demanded our attention, the mind wandered, and in that wandering, creativity was born. Now boredom has been eliminated. Every idle second is filled with stimulation. The algorithm ensures we are never without something to see, hear, or react to. But in eliminating boredom, it has also eliminated stillness, the inner silence where reflection happens. Philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." If that was true in the 17th century, it is catastrophic now. We are never alone, but we are also never truly present. Our attention, fragmented, scattered, monetized, has become the most valuable resource on Earth, yet it is the one thing we no longer own. The machinery of belief. Desire and belief are twins. What we want shapes what we think is true. Algorithms exploit this by feeding us beliefs that validate our desires. Echo chambers, recommendation loops, curated realities, these are not flaws in the system, they are the system. In the 20th century, Aldous Huxley warned of a future where people would be controlled not by pain, but by pleasure. A really efficient totalitarian state, he wrote, would make its slaves love their servitude. We now live in that paradox. We are not forced to consume, we choose to. We are not censored, we are flooded. Control no longer requires suppression, it thrives on abundance. Our beliefs become self-reinforcing stories, chosen for us by patterns we helped create. We think we're exploring truth, but we're exploring ourselves, endlessly, algorithmically, predictably. The erosion of the inner life. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest hazard of all, losing one's self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." This quiet loss defines the algorithmic age. We don't feel ourselves disappearing, we feel more visible, more connected, more validated than ever. Yet this constant visibility replaces self-awareness with self-presentation. Every post is a performance, every thought is optimized for engagement. Our interior lives, once private and sacred, are now raw material for analytics. We have traded introspection for interaction, reflection for reaction, being for branding. Desire was once the most personal of human experiences, a flicker of will, a signal of life's intensity. Now it is the most engineered. The algorithm does not simply know what we want, it teaches us what to want next. It curates our curiosity, commodifies our impulses, and rewards the predictability of our passions. We once shaped our tools, now our tools shape our souls. The next step in this exploration will take us deeper into the mechanics of control, how algorithms don't just know our desires, but monitor and discipline us within a digital architecture of visibility. Because in the world of the algorithm, to be seen is to be controlled. Section 4, the digital Panopticon, Foucault's nightmare realized. In the late 18th century, the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham designed a prison he believed would be the most efficient in history. It was called the Panopticon, a circular structure in which every inmate could be watched from a single, unseen tower. The brilliance of Bentham's design was not that prisoners were constantly watched, but that they could never know when they were. The possibility of surveillance was enough to make them discipline themselves. 2 centuries later, Michel Foucault used the Panopticon as a metaphor for modern society. In Discipline and Punish, he wrote, "Visibility is a trap." Foucault warned that power in the modern age would no longer rely on chains or whips, but on observation, on the internalization of control. Today, the digital world has realized his prophecy with algorithmic precision. From watchtower to server farm, the watchtower still stands, but it has changed form. It no longer looms in stone, it hums in glass data centers scattered across the planet. We built the walls ourselves, status updates, selfies, location pings, search queries. Every photograph, every like, every casual search adds another brick to our invisible cell. The difference between Bentham's prison and ours is that we volunteer to enter. We carry our cells in our pockets and pay monthly for the privilege. In Bentham's day, surveillance required an observer. Today, it requires only code, algorithms that monitor not merely what we say, but how we say it, when, for how long, and to whom. The watcher no longer has eyes, it has data. The internalization of the feed. Foucault's insight was that true power works when the individual begins to police himself. Social media perfected this principle. We curate our own images, edit our own truths, filter our own emotions to fit the logic of visibility. The algorithm doesn't need to censor you, it simply teaches you what earns attention. You learn to speak its language, brevity, outrage, performance. You stop saying what is true and start saying what works. The feed becomes a feedback loop of self-management. Every post is both an act of expression and an act of surveillance of yourself. You measure your worth by engagement metrics and call it connection. You fear invisibility more than inauthenticity. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau warned, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." He could not have imagined that one day the chains would glitter like notifications. The economy of visibility. To be seen is to exist. To disappear is to die socially. Platforms exploit this primal fear. They reward those who conform to their rhythms and punish those who withdraw. In this system, visibility is currency. Likes, shares, and followers are the new social capital, symbols of value in an economy built entirely on attention. The algorithm becomes the market itself, setting invisible prices on every image, word, and gesture. And like any market, it is ruthless. Those who feed it with outrage and spectacle rise. Those who offer nuance and reflection fade into obscurity. Foucault would recognize this instantly. Control no longer needs violence when the desire to be visible ensures obedience. Surveillance capitalism. Modern surveillance differs from its historical predecessors in one crucial respect: it is profitable. Companies no longer observe to punish, they observe to predict. Data is extracted not for justice, but for advertising, for shaping consumption, and, by extension, behavior. Scholar Shoshana Zuboff calls this surveillance capitalism, a system that trades in human experience as raw material for prediction and modification. Its logic is chillingly simple. The more we know about you, the less you know about us. In this asymmetry lies the essence of digital power. We reveal ourselves endlessly to systems that remain opaque. The user becomes the used. The watcher remains unseen. The algorithmic state. Surveillance is no longer confined to corporations. Governments, too, employ algorithmic oversight, facial recognition, predictive policing, data scoring. The digital panopticon has merged with the political. Hannah Arendt once wrote, "The greatest evil is not radical, it is banal." It lies in the quiet normalization of systems that strip agency while appearing perfectly rational. No one commands you to comply. Compliance is coded into convenience. You unlock your phone, log in, and consent again and again without reading a single term of service. Freedom erodes not with a scream, but with a click. The performance of freedom. The most insidious feature of the Panopticon was that prisoners believed they acted freely. So too do we. We choose what to post, what to watch, whom to follow. Yet each of these choices is guided by invisible incentives. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls this era the achievement society. We are no longer oppressed by others, we oppress ourselves in the pursuit of performance. We exploit our own creativity, our own privacy, our own exhaustion, and call it empowerment. The algorithm doesn't command you to post, it makes you want to. You become your own warden, chasing metrics that measure not meaning but compliance. The erosion of trust. Constant visibility breeds not safety, but paranoia. When everyone watches and is watched, authenticity dies. We no longer speak with each other, but for each other, performing reality in fragments. The sociologist Irving Goffman compared human interaction to theater, where every person performs roles before an audience. But the algorithmic stage never closes. There is no backstage anymore. Every private thought can become public record, every misstep immortalized in data. The fear of exposure produces self-censorship, a subtler form of control than any government decree. The result is a society that appears free yet trembles under the weight of its own self-awareness. Escape or adaptation? Can one leave the Panopticon? To disconnect is possible but costly. To delete one's accounts is to risk social invisibility, professional loss, even economic disadvantage. And yet, resistance does not have to mean disappearance. It can mean awareness, seeing the walls for what they are. Foucault argued that where there is power, there is also the possibility of resistance. The act of recognizing surveillance weakens its spell. To reclaim attention, to slow down, to choose consciously is itself a rebellion. The algorithm thrives on unconscious behavior, awareness starves it. The Panopticon has evolved from architecture to atmosphere. It no longer surrounds us, it permeates us. We live inside its logic every time we seek validation from an invisible audience, every time we equate visibility with worth. The philosopher Nietzsche once warned, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster." In building a world where everything is watched, we have become both prisoners and guards. Yet all is not lost. What was built can be questioned, what is questioned can be changed. But to change it, we must first understand how deeply the will to control and the desire to be seen are woven into the human condition. In the next section, we will turn from surveillance to simulation, from being watched to being deceived. Because control is most complete not when we are observed, but when we mistake illusion for reality. Section 5, the simulation of choice, Baudrillard's mirror. We like to believe that choice defines freedom, that each click, each decision, is a declaration of autonomy. Yet in the digital age, freedom itself has become a simulation, a carefully crafted illusion. What we perceive as choice is often pre-programmed behavior, shaped by unseen algorithms that curate our experience, rank our options, and predict our desires. French philosopher Jean Baudrillard foresaw this era long before the rise of social media. He wrote, "We live in a world where there is more and more information and less meaning. The algorithm does not merely suggest options, it designs a reality in which every option seems viable, attractive, and self-evident. The user believes they are navigating a vast universe of possibilities, but in truth, they move along a narrow, invisible track, a trajectory optimized for engagement, profit, or behavior modification." Hyperreality and digital choice. Baudrillard called this condition hyperreality, a world in which the distinction between reality and representation collapses. Social media feeds, recommendation engines, and targeted ads are the modern manifestations of this principle. They construct a reality that mirrors desire, yet is not derived from genuine experience. Consider a simple YouTube feed. Videos appear that seem tailored to your interests, yet their selection is the product of millions of interactions, data points, and predictive models. You believe you are choosing freely among infinite content, but every suggestion is a carefully computed probability designed to keep your attention alive. The algorithm teaches you to want what it knows you will want, and in doing so, it shapes your perception of reality itself. Your interests, your passions, your curiosities all become reflections of the system's predictions. The illusion of autonomy. Philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that true autonomy arises when reason governs desire. Choice must stem from conscious deliberation rather than external compulsion. But in the hyperreal world of algorithmic curation, our deliberation is often an illusion. We select from what the algorithm presents. We decide among the options it predicts we will prefer. Our reasoning becomes reactive rather than generative, our desires guided by patterns we mistake for personal preference. The ancient Greek philosopher Epictetus observed, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Yet what happens to us today is already shaped by invisible systems. The space between stimulus and response, once a domain of freedom, has been compressed as the algorithm predicts, nudges, and anticipates every possible reaction. The architecture of choice. Hyperreal choice is carefully structured. Algorithms determine not just what you see, but how you see it, the order, the framing, the context. This architecture subtly amplifies certain ideas while suppressing others, steering your perception without your awareness. For example, a social media platform might prioritize emotionally charged content, ranking videos that evoke fear, excitement, or validation higher than neutral information. You scroll, believing that your attention is voluntary, but in fact, the architecture of your feed manipulates emotional response, getting the decisions that appear freely made. The philosopher Plato, in his allegory of the cave, warned that humans often mistake shadows for reality. In the digital age, the shadows are curated streams of content, and the cave itself is algorithmically lit. The user is free only to move among the projections, unaware of the structure that confines them. The mirror of desire. Algorithms are mirrors, but they are mirrors that distort reality. They reflect patterns of behavior not to reveal truth, but to optimize predictability. Consider targeted advertising. It does not simply show products you might like. It constructs desire itself, reinforcing impulses you may not have known you had. Every click, every pause, every interaction feeds the mirror, refining the algorithm's reflection. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that human desire is inherently insatiable. We are driven by will and endless striving. The algorithm exploits this natural condition. It feeds desire, measures response, adjusts stimulation, creating a feedback loop in which your will appears autonomous while being continuously shaped by invisible forces. The collapse of meaning. In the hyperreal world, meaning is replaced by engagement metrics. Every like, every share, every comment becomes a measure of value, not the content itself, not the ideas, not the truth, but the reaction it elicits. Baudrillard predicted that the proliferation of signs and symbols could outpace the world they represent, producing simulacra, images and patterns that stand in for reality, yet have no independent grounding. The algorithm amplifies this effect. Your feed becomes a series of signals that simulate choice, simulate interest, simulate significance, but are divorced from the tangible world. The philosopher Heidegger might call this a form of enframing, a technological mode in which the human subject is drawn into a system of utility and predictability. In the algorithmic hyperreality, we are no longer observers of the world, we are data points within it. The psychological consequence. Hyperreal choice is not merely a philosophical curiosity, it shapes the psychology of decision-making. Studies show that when options are endless yet curated, humans experience decision fatigue, anxiety, and the paradox of choice, the stress of choosing freely while being subtly manipulated. What feels like freedom can become a trap of overstimulation in which agency is continuously deferred. Our sense of self, our identity, becomes entangled with the feedback loops of engagement. Likes and recommendations act as external validations, substituting for introspection and authentic desire. The algorithm becomes a silent instructor, teaching us what to want, what to prioritize, what to care about, all while convincing us that we have chosen these things independently. Freedom as performance. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han describes the modern age as one of achievement and performance, where individuals internalize social and technological pressures, policing their own behavior. The algorithm extends this principle to desire itself. We perform choice as a show of autonomy, yet our performance is carefully scaffolded by systems that anticipate every move. We are both actors and audience, our own desires edited, ranked, and replayed by the unseen hand of data. Freedom becomes a theatrical effect, not a lived reality. The more the system understands us, the more convincing the simulation of choice becomes. The algorithm does not imprison, it seduces, it does not coerce, it curates. We are left believing in autonomy, while our perceptions, desires, and decisions are shaped, predicted, and optimized. Baudrillard's warning resonates louder than ever. We live not in the world itself, but in a simulation of the world, where reality and representation collapse. Yet awareness remains the first step toward liberation. Recognizing the simulation allows us to step back, question, and reclaim space for reflection and true deliberation. In the next section, we will explore Plato's cave in the age of digital shadows, examining how algorithmic influence transforms perception, knowledge, and reality itself. Section 6, Plato's cave in HD, escaping the algorithmic shadows. Plato's allegory of the cave is one of philosophy's most enduring metaphors. Prisoners are chained inside a dark cavern, seeing only shadows cast on the wall. To them, the shadows are reality. Only by breaking free and turning toward the light can they perceive truth. In the digital age, the cave has gone high definition. Screens glow in every corner, streams of content dance like shadows across our consciousness, and the algorithms behind them act as silent puppet masters, controlling the angles, intensity, and timing of the light. We are in many ways the prisoners of our own creation. We have willingly sat in the cave, mesmerized by shadows that appear personalized, curated, and engaging. The algorithm has perfected Plato's cave. The shadows are more enticing than reality, the chains invisible, and the idea of stepping into the light increasingly daunting. The nature of digital shadows. The shadows in Plato's cave were cast by objects behind the prisoners. They were mere representations, incomplete and distorted. Similarly, digital content is rarely reality. It is a simulation, selected, ranked, and framed to capture attention. Every trending video, viral tweet, or recommended article is a reflection, not of objective truth, but of what will keep the prisoner engaged. Engagement, not accuracy, drives the system. What the user perceives as a spontaneous discovery is often preordained by predictive algorithms designed to reinforce existing preferences and biases. The philosopher Aristotle wrote, "All men by nature desire to know, but the algorithm transforms the pursuit of knowledge into the pursuit of stimulation. Our natural curiosity is guided, shaped, and at times exploited. The shadows are no longer arbitrary. They are crafted to elicit desire, reaction, and time on screen." The comfort of confinement. Plato's prisoners were reluctant to leave the cave. Light was blinding, the outside world confusing, the unknown intimidating. Similarly, leaving the digital cave is uncomfortable. To disconnect, to resist, to confront information uncurated and unscripted is to face a world without optimization, a reality unfiltered by the algorithm's predictive lens. We have grown accustomed to convenience, to feeds that anticipate our desires, to curated echo chambers that confirm our beliefs. The cave is no longer a prison, it is a sanctuary. We trade discomfort for curated comfort, uncertainty for algorithmic clarity. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre observed, "Hell is other people. In the digital cave, hell is the algorithmic shaping of ourselves, a subtle coercion disguised as pleasure, comfort, and freedom." Escaping the cave. Plato imagined that one prisoner might break free and ascend towards sunlight. The process is gradual, disorienting, and requires effort. The algorithmic cave offers no such guidance. It encourages conformity and punishes deviation, not with force, but through invisibility, disengagement, and social marginalization. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing that every suggestion, like, and trend is part of a predictive system empowers the individual to reclaim agency. It is the act of turning one's gaze away from the shadows, of questioning what is presented, seeking sources beyond curated streams, and deliberately creating spaces of unmediated experience. Philosopher Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In the age of algorithms, this sentiment is crucial. Freedom is not merely the absence of constraint, but the cultivation of deliberate choice amidst pervasive influence. The mirror of the algorithm. The algorithm acts as a mirror, reflecting patterns back to the user in ever more sophisticated ways. Unlike Plato's shadows, these reflections are interactive. They adapt to attention, nudging thought, shaping perception, and even influencing emotion. Where once we might have recognized a shadow as a symbol of limitation, we now perceive our own reflection as truth. Our identity, preferences, and desires are continuously curated, creating an internalized panopticon in which we monitor, adjust, and optimize ourselves according to the mirror the system holds up. Soren Kierkegaard warned of the silent erosion of the self. The greatest hazard of all, losing one's self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. In the digital cave, this quiet loss is operationalized. Selfhood becomes measurable, predictable, and increasingly defined by algorithmic feedback. The collapse of critical perception. Critical perception is born from contrast, the recognition that shadows are not the whole and that light exists elsewhere. The algorithmic cave suppresses contrast. Personalization ensures that users are rarely exposed to ideas that disrupt their worldview, creating echo chambers that reinforce belief rather than challenge it. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the herd instinct, the ease with which individuals conform to collective thought. In the algorithmic age, this instinct is amplified by technology. Trending content, recommendation loops, and popularity algorithms subtly dictate taste, opinion, and even moral evaluation. The cave now enforces conformity not through chains, but through patterned attention and reinforcement. To question is to risk irrelevance. To dissent is to risk invisibility. Reclaiming light. Escaping the cave in HD requires intentionality. It is not simply a matter of unplugging, but of cultivating resistance and reflection. Awareness recognizes that feeds are curated, recommendations are predictive, and engagement is the currency. Diversification. Seek sources beyond your habitual streams. Expose yourself to content that challenges assumptions. Mindful interaction. Engage with intention rather than habit. Question why you scroll, like, or share. Digital silence. Create spaces of unmediated experience, where thought is not monitored or shaped by algorithms. In doing so, one begins to see not just the shadows, but the structure casting them. One begins to regain the space between stimulus and response, the essence of autonomy and self-determination. The paradox of liberation. Even once liberated, the shadow remains seductive. The cave is comfortable, the algorithm pleasurable, the feed affirming. Returning to the light requires effort, courage, and discipline. Yet liberation is possible. Awareness transforms choice from simulated to deliberate, reclaiming the space where human freedom can exist. The digital cave is not a prison in the traditional sense. It is a test of attention, reflection, and self-determination. Philosopher Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose." The algorithm attempts to erase that space. The shadows it projects are mesmerizing, endless, and finely tuned. But even in the high-definition cave, that space, the possibility of authentic choice, remains. Plato's cave in HD is not a metaphor, it is a lived reality. The algorithm presents shadows so compelling, so personalized, that we mistake them for autonomy. It shapes our desires, monitors our behavior, and predicts our decisions, all while leaving us the comforting illusion of freedom. Yet the path to liberation is clear: awareness, intentionality, and courage. By recognizing the shadows and seeking the light, we begin to reclaim the space of genuine human freedom, a space that the algorithm cannot fully predict, optimize, or control. The next section will explore the myth of free will itself, from Nietzsche's philosophy to modern neuroscience, revealing how our sense of choice is both real and illusory in the age of algorithms. Section 7, The Myth of Free Will, Nietzsche to Neuroscience. We like to believe that free will defines us, that each choice, each decision, each moral judgment arises from a sovereign inner self, independent and autonomous. Yet the intersection of philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience suggests that our freedom is more constrained than we imagine, a notion amplified by the age of algorithms. Friedrich Nietzsche, writing in the 19th century, explored the tension between instinct, culture, and morality. He observed, "Man is something that shall be overcome. What have you done to overcome him?" Nietzsche's insight was profound. Human beings are not purely rational agents. We are creatures of instinct, habit, and social conditioning. The self we believe makes choices is already shaped by desires, fears, and influences largely outside conscious control. The algorithm exploits precisely this vulnerability. It observes the patterns Nietzsche described, habits, emotional triggers, impulses, and predicts and shapes behavior with unprecedented precision. What feels like free will is often prearranged by patterns the system has learned from billions of prior interactions. Free will in the ancient philosophical lens. The debate over free will is not new. Ancient philosophers wrestled with its limits. Aristotle argued for rational choice, that humans act according to reason to achieve virtue. Stoics believed that freedom lay in mastering one's desires, transcending external circumstance. Yet even they recognized constraints. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Algorithms have shifted the boundary of control. Once, the external forces were tangible, rulers, laws, social pressure. Today, the forces are invisible, predictive, and embedded in every digital interaction. Modern neuroscience and the illusion of choice. Neuroscience has added another layer to the puzzle. Experiments dating back to Benjamin Libet in the 1980s suggest that brain activity precedes conscious decision-making. Neural patterns indicate action before subjects report the conscious intention to act. In other words, the feeling of choosing freely may be post hoc rationalization, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of our behavior. Algorithms exploit this post hoc tendency. They do not need to force behavior. They simply create conditions in which actions naturally align with predicted desires, giving users the illusion of choice while minimizing conscious deliberation. As the neuroscientist Sam Harris argues, free will is an illusion, but responsibility is not. This distinction is crucial. We are responsible for our actions in the social and moral sense, yet our autonomy is shaped by forces beyond our awareness, and in the digital age, those forces include algorithmic influence. Behavioral manipulation as philosophical problem. If our will is not entirely free, the presence of algorithms raises ethical concerns. Shoshana Zuboff terms the practice behavioral surplus, the extraction of attention and prediction from our activities to manipulate behavior. The problem is not that algorithms are evil. The problem is that they function as invisible governors of our desires, systematically altering the probabilities of action without our awareness. The philosopher Hannah Arendt warned of this in the context of bureaucratic authority. The most radical revolutionary will become a conservative the day after the revolution. In algorithmic governance, this insight takes a digital form. Systems that observe, predict, and shape do so without overt coercion, yet they gradually constrain the horizon of possibility, the very essence of free will. The feedback loop of selfhood. Free will, at its core, requires reflection, a space between impulse and action. Algorithms shrink that space by reinforcing predictable behavior. Every like, every click, every view is data that feeds the system, which in turn optimizes the content we encounter. Desires and actions are continuously mirrored back, creating a feedback loop. The more the system understands us, the more it can shape the very choices we believe are ours. Nietzsche's Overcoming of Man now has a digital counterpart. We are challenged not only to overcome our instincts, but also the algorithmic scaffolding that predicts and channels them. The ethics of influence. Philosophers from Kant to Rawls emphasized the moral responsibility inherent in influencing others. Kant argued that human beings must always be treated as ends in themselves, not as means. Yet algorithmic systems routinely treat users as means, sources of data, nodes in a network of engagement, patterns to be optimized. This raises profound ethical questions. If free will is partially an illusion, to what extent are users accountable for actions influenced by algorithms? If algorithms can manipulate behavior subtly and continuously, does this constitute a form of coercion? How can society ensure that technological influence respects the inherent dignity of human agency? These questions challenge not only technologists, but all who live under algorithmic regimes, essentially, everyone who clicks, swipes, and consumes digital content. Choice and consciousness. Despite the constraints, free will is not entirely extinguished. Philosophers, psychologists, and neuroscientists converge on the idea that awareness expands choice. Even in a deterministic framework, consciousness allows for deliberation, reflection, and the possibility of resistance. Algorithms may shape desire and nudge behavior, but they cannot enforce internal reflection. The individual retains the capacity to step back, evaluate, and act deliberately. Nietzsche himself valued consciousness as a tool for self-overcoming. Become who you are. Becoming ourselves in the digital age requires awareness of the forces that shape us, including algorithms that subtly sculpt thought, attention, and desire. The paradox of freedom in the algorithmic age. We live in a world where technology has expanded possibilities while simultaneously constraining autonomy. Algorithms enable connection, knowledge, and efficiency, yet they do so by shaping, predicting, and guiding behavior. Freedom becomes paradoxical. Externally, we have more options than ever, infinite content, infinite pathways. Internally, the architecture of choice is designed, predictable, and optimized, limiting the effective exercise of will. Philosopher Albert Camus warned of absurdity, the tension between human desire for meaning and the universe's indifference. The algorithmic age is similarly absurd. We crave autonomy, yet we dwell in a space pre-shaped by patterns beyond our awareness. Free will has always been fragile, constrained by culture, habit, and psychology. Algorithms magnify these constraints exponentially, transforming the very fabric of choice. Yet freedom persists in the capacity for awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. Understanding the algorithm's influence is the first step in reclaiming agency. Recognizing the subtle erosion of choice allows us to navigate the digital world not as passive prisoners, but as conscious participants. In the next section, we will explore the possibilities of resistance, examining strategies philosophers, psychologists, and technologists suggest to reclaim autonomy in an age of algorithmic governance. Section 8, Resisting the Algorithm, Philosophy, Awareness, and Digital Autonomy. If the algorithm shapes desire, predicts behavior, and narrows choice, is resistance even possible? Can human freedom survive in a world designed for surveillance, engagement, and optimization? Philosophy, psychology, and practical experience suggest that it can, but only through deliberate awareness and intentional action. Awareness as the first line of defense. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard warned of the quiet erosion of the self. The greatest hazard of all, losing one's self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. Awareness is the antidote. To resist the algorithm, we must first recognize its presence, the predictive suggestions, the emotionally charged feeds, the personalization that seems natural but is engineered. Without this recognition, resistance is impossible. Like Plato's prisoner in the cave, we remain mesmerized by shadows, mistaking curated projections for autonomous choice. Even simple acts, questioning why we click, pausing before sharing, evaluating what shapes our attention, can reclaim the space between stimulus and response, the essential domain of human agency. Critical consumption of information. Algorithms thrive on passive engagement. They encourage scrolling, liking, and reacting without reflection. To counteract this, one must adopt the mindset of a critical consumer. Question the source, recognize that feeds are curated, not neutral. Diversify inputs, seek perspectives outside your comfort zone to counter confirmation bias. Evaluate relevance, ask whether content contributes meaningfully to knowledge or merely triggers reaction. Philosopher Immanuel Kant emphasized autonomy as rational self-governance. Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. In the algorithmic age, enlightenment requires self-imposed mindfulness, a conscious refusal to let predictive systems dictate attention, belief, and desire. Digital minimalism and conscious interaction. The modern philosopher Cal Newport advocates for digital minimalism, intentional, focused use of technology that prioritizes value over compulsion. Resisting the algorithm involves structured use, limiting time on platforms that exploit attention. Deliberate choice, engaging only with content that serves goals, learning, or creativity. Mindful production, creating content not for likes or validation, but for authentic expression. These steps reintroduce the possibility of agency in spaces designed to erode it. By deciding when, why, and how to engage, users transform from passive participants into conscious operators of their own attention. Building cognitive immunity. The philosopher Epictetus suggested that freedom lies in mastery of perception. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. We can apply this to the digital world. By recognizing the mechanics of engagement, the dopamine loops, emotional nudges, and curated suggestions, we develop cognitive immunity. This includes recognizing emotional triggers in content, not reacting impulsively to stimuli designed to capture attention, practicing delayed engagement, pausing before clicking, liking, or sharing. Over time, this creates a mental buffer, restoring the space of reflective choice that algorithms attempt to compress. Philosophical reflection as resistance. Beyond technical strategies, philosophy itself offers tools to resist algorithmic control. Stoicism, existentialism, and mindfulness traditions all emphasize self-knowledge, understanding your desires and motives. Autonomy, separating inner judgment from external influence. Reflection, creating moments of stillness for conscious decision-making. Nietzsche is called to become who you are gains new relevance in the digital age. To resist the algorithm is to cultivate a self that is aware, reflective, and deliberate, rather than reactive to engineered stimuli. Community and collective awareness. Resistance is not solely individual. Algorithms function by exploiting collective behavior. Awareness can be amplified through community. Sharing strategies for mindful digital use. Discussing the influence of recommendation systems and echo chambers. Supporting platforms that prioritize privacy, transparency, and user control. Philosopher Hannah Arendt emphasized that human freedom exists within the political and social sphere. Collective consciousness of algorithmic influence can create social norms that counter manipulation, reinforcing spaces for authentic engagement. Technological remedies. Philosophy and awareness are powerful, but technical interventions also matter. Privacy tools, ad blockers, tracking prevention, and anonymization reduce behavioral extraction. Open source alternatives, platforms designed for transparency limit manipulative optimization. Algorithmic literacy, understanding how recommendation systems work, enables informed interaction. Awareness of these tools transforms the user from a passive data point into an active agent, capable of navigating the algorithmic landscape without surrendering autonomy. Reclaiming desire and intention. Algorithms shape desire, but humans can reclaim intentionality. Nietzsche and Schopenhauer remind us that desire is natural. The challenge is directing it consciously rather than letting external systems engineer it. Practical strategies include prioritizing meaningful goals over curated distractions, engaging with offline experiences to cultivate intrinsic satisfaction, reflecting on values before acting rather than reacting to algorithmic stimuli. Freedom is restored not by eliminating desire, but by aligning it with conscious purpose rather than engineered prompts. The path forward. Resistance is an ongoing process, not a single act. It requires discipline, reflection, and courage. The algorithm is adaptive. It learns from behavior to regain influence. Yet even in the face of pervasive digital governance, human consciousness remains the final frontier. Awareness, critical thinking, and intentionality can restore autonomy even when freedom feels compressed. Philosopher Albert Camus observed, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." In the algorithmic age, the struggle to reclaim agency, attention, and authenticity defines the essence of modern freedom. The algorithm can predict, influence, and shape. It can guide attention, mold desire, and engineer behavior, but it cannot eliminate awareness. Freedom persists in the spaces we cultivate between stimulus and response, in the reflective pauses that allow conscious choice. Philosophy, mindfulness, community, and deliberate digital practices offer the tools to reclaim autonomy. In the next section, we will examine the societal implications of algorithmic influence, exploring how control at the individual level scales to culture, democracy, and collective belief. Section 9, Society under Algorithmic Influence, Culture, Democracy, and Belief. The algorithm does not only shape individual desire and attention, its influence scales, permeating the very fabric of society. Culture, democracy, and collective belief are increasingly mediated, curated, and amplified by systems designed for engagement, prediction, and profit. The question is no longer only whether you are free, but whether society itself retains autonomy. Algorithmic culture. Culture is, in part, the sum of what we pay attention to collectively. Music, literature, news, and social norms evolve through shared engagement. Algorithms have transformed this process. They curate collective attention, determining which voices are amplified and which fade into obscurity. Consider the viral phenomenon. Songs, videos, and memes spread not purely through human resonance, but via recommendation systems that maximize engagement. Cultural trends are no longer purely organic, they are engineered. The philosopher Marshall McLuhan warned that media shapes consciousness itself. The medium is the message. Algorithms are the ultimate medium, invisible, pervasive, and adaptive. They do not merely transmit culture, they construct it, subtly reinforcing certain ideas, emotions, and behaviors while suppressing others. Democracy in the age of engagement. Political discourse is particularly vulnerable. Democracies rely on informed citizens making deliberated choices. Yet algorithmically curated content often prioritizes emotion over accuracy, outrage over nuance, and virality over truth. Social media platforms serve as both the marketplace and the amplifier of political ideas. The philosopher John Stuart Mill argued that freedom of thought requires exposure to diverse perspectives. The algorithm, by contrast, tends to create filter bubbles, reinforcing existing beliefs while limiting exposure to dissenting views. The result is a paradox. The infrastructure that could empower democracy often erodes its foundations. Citizens appear active, engaged, and informed, yet their perceptions, beliefs, and choices are shaped in subtle, algorithmic ways. The economics of belief. Algorithms monetize attention. Every click, view, and engagement generates profit. This economic imperative shapes not just content, but belief itself. The philosopher Hannah Arendt observed that totalitarian power could thrive not by coercion, but by normalizing compliance. Algorithmic systems, too, normalize certain behaviors, preferences, and beliefs, cultivating a culture where visibility and popularity dictate perceived truth. Viral misinformation, polarized narratives, and manufactured outrage are not accidental. They are the natural byproducts of a system optimized for engagement and revenue. Belief becomes a product, curated, amplified, and monetized. The feedback loop of society. Algorithms feed back into society, reinforcing trends, biases, and social norms. When a video trends, it influences not only viewers, but also content creators, advertisers, and media outlets. Engagement signals drive production decisions, amplifying the content that performs best and marginalizing nuance. Philosopher Hegel suggested that history unfolds through the dialectic, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, driven by collective human action. In the algorithmic age, this dialectic is mediated by invisible systems that shape perception, steer attention, and subtly guide societal evolution. Culture and politics are no longer merely reflective of human values. They are co-authored by algorithms whose logic prioritizes profit, engagement, and predictability over human deliberation. Polarization and fragmentation. One of the most visible societal effects of algorithmic influence is polarization. Algorithms amplify content that provokes strong emotion because it drives attention. Fear, anger, and moral outrage perform better than nuance, empathy, or compromise. The philosopher Montesquieu warned that societies fracture when citizens lose shared experiences and mutual understanding. Algorithms exacerbate this tendency, creating echo chambers in which beliefs are reinforced and opposing perspectives demonized. The result is a society fragmented along informational lines, a digital balkanization where perception of reality differs dramatically across groups. Each algorithmic microcosm becomes a separate cave, with shadows that align to specific worldviews. The erosion of public trust. Trust is the foundation of social cohesion, yet algorithmic curation, misinformation, and personalized content undermine it. When users realize that content is selected for engagement rather than truth, skepticism grows. Philosopher David Hume noted that belief is social as much as rational. We trust what others signal as credible. Algorithms manipulate this social trust by flooding perception with attention-maximizing content, blurring the lines between fact, opinion, and performance. The societal consequence is profound. Not only do individuals feel manipulated, but public discourse itself becomes unstable, as shared reality is replaced by curated, personalized realities. The concentration of power. Algorithms concentrate influence in unprecedented ways. Platforms with massive reach can shape culture, commerce, and political opinion. Philosopher Michel Foucault warned that power operates not only through force, but through knowledge and surveillance. Algorithms embody both. They accumulate vast amounts of knowledge about individuals and society, and they shape behavior with subtle, pervasive influence. This concentration of power is not regulated by democratic processes in the traditional sense. Decisions about what content is amplified, what trends emerge, and how engagement is optimized are privately controlled, creating a digital aristocracy of influence. Collective responsibility. Even as algorithms shape society, humans retain agency. Collective awareness and intentional engagement can mitigate manipulation. Supporting platforms that prioritize transparency and ethical design. Educating citizens about algorithmic influence. Encouraging media literacy and critical thinking in schools and communities. Philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau emphasized that society is shaped by the collective will. In the algorithmic era, that will must be exercised consciously, not merely assumed. To preserve cultural and democratic integrity. The ethical imperative. Algorithmic influence raises ethical questions at every level. Corporate responsibility. Should companies prioritize societal well-being over engagement-driven profit? Individual responsibility. How can citizens act to preserve autonomy and informed choice? Societal design. What frameworks can ensure that technology enhances, rather than undermines, culture and democracy? These are not abstract questions. They define the kind of world that will emerge from algorithmic governance, one where humans remain active participants, or one where influence is invisible, ubiquitous, and largely uncontested. The algorithm scales the challenges of free will from individual attention to collective culture. It shapes desire, perception, and belief, creating a society in which visibility, engagement, and predictability dictate truth and value. Yet the same philosophical tools that guide individual resistance, awareness, critical thinking, reflection, and ethical deliberation apply to society as a whole. By cultivating collective consciousness, transparency, and digital literacy, humans can reclaim agency not only for themselves, but for culture, democracy, and public life. The next section will explore the philosophical and practical framework for rebuilding autonomy, synthesizing the lessons of Plato, Nietzsche, and modern thinkers to envision a path toward conscious coexistence with algorithmic influence. Section 10. Rebuilding autonomy, philosophical and practical strategies. If algorithms shape desire, predict behavior, and influence society, the question remains, can autonomy be rebuilt? Philosophy, psychology, and practical experience suggest it can, but only through intentional cultivation of awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. Autonomy is not a gift, it is a practice. One awareness as the foundation. All philosophical traditions emphasize self-knowledge as the cornerstone of freedom. Socrates famously declared, "Know thyself." In the algorithmic age, this wisdom takes on a new urgency. Awareness requires recognizing the systems that shape perception, feeds, recommendations, notifications, and the subtle emotional nudges embedded in digital design. Practical steps include observing how attention is captured and directed, reflecting on emotional responses to curated content, recognizing behavioral patterns reinforced by predictive systems. Without this foundational awareness, any attempt at autonomy is superficial. One may believe they are making free choices, yet they are operating within the invisible architecture of an algorithmic cage. 2. Critical thinking and media literacy. Autonomy requires the capacity to evaluate, question, and challenge information. Algorithms often present content optimized for engagement, not truth. Critical thinking allows individuals to discern influence from insight. Strategies include fact-checking sources and seeking evidence, comparing diverse viewpoints to avoid echo chambers, questioning emotional reactions before accepting them as authentic. Philosopher John Stuart Mill emphasized the importance of diverse ideas for intellectual and moral growth. In a world curated by algorithms, diversity of exposure is a deliberate act, not a default state. 3. Mindful engagement and digital minimalism. Cal Newport's concept of digital minimalism encourages purposeful interaction with technology. Rather than being led by algorithmic incentives, users can reclaim intentionality. Practical strategies include scheduling specific times for social media and news consumption, prioritizing platforms that minimize addictive loops, engaging with content that aligns with personal goals, creativity, or learning. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han notes that excessive digital engagement erodes reflection. Mindful, disciplined use restores the space between stimulus and response, the domain of authentic freedom. 4. Deliberate cultivation of desire. Algorithms manipulate desire by predicting what users will find compelling. Resistance requires the deliberate cultivation of intrinsic desires. Practical steps include identifying values and goals independent of social validation, engaging in offline experiences that foster genuine satisfaction, practicing reflection before acting on impulses elicited by curated content. Nietzsche's injunction to become who you are is particularly relevant. Autonomy grows from choosing and directing one's own desires rather than reacting to engineered prompts. 5. Community and collective action. Autonomy is reinforced in community. Plato emphasized dialogue as a path to truth, and modern philosophers agree that shared reflection strengthens agency. Practical actions include discussing algorithmic influence openly with peers, supporting transparency and ethical design in technology, advocating for regulation and literacy programs that protect collective autonomy. Collective awareness can scale individual resistance, ensuring that society itself remains reflective and conscious, rather than passively guided by invisible systems. 6. Technical literacy and tools. Awareness and philosophy are critical, but practical tools matter. Digital literacy includes understanding how algorithms operate and employing technical measures to reduce manipulation. Privacy and tracking tools, ad blockers, VPNs, and privacy settings limit behavioral data collection. Algorithm transparency, seeking platforms with open source code or clear recommendation mechanisms. Content curation control, adjusting feeds and notifications to reduce automated influence. By combining technical and philosophical literacy, users reclaim control over attention, one of the algorithm's primary levers. 7. Ethical responsibility. Autonomy is intertwined with responsibility. Kant emphasized treating others as ends, not means. In the algorithmic age, ethical awareness involves recognizing that engagement feeds predictive systems, avoiding spreading misinformation, even inadvertently, modeling reflective, deliberate behavior online to foster collective awareness. Freedom is not merely personal, it is social and relational, dependent on the ethical exercise of influence within communities. 8. Practices of reflection and pause. Algorithms exploit immediacy, instant reactions, rapid consumption, impulsive sharing. Reflection restores the temporal gap necessary for conscious choice. Practical methods include journaling thoughts before posting or reacting, practicing meditation or mindfulness to observe impulses, scheduling offline periods to cultivate unmediated experience. Philosopher Epictetus emphasized the power of the reflective pause. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This pause is where autonomy resides, even under pervasive algorithmic influence. 9. Education and lifelong learning. Awareness and resistance require understanding. Societal autonomy depends on education that cultivates critical thought, digital literacy, and philosophical reflection. Schools, universities, and community programs can empower citizens to recognize manipulative systems, question assumptions presented online, develop deliberate habits for conscious interaction. As Plato recognized, the well-educated individual is not simply informed, but capable of discerning truth from illusion, precisely the skill needed in the algorithmic age. 10. Philosophical mindset for the digital age. Finally, autonomy requires a philosophical mindset. Accept that influence exists, perfect independence is impossible. Focus on cultivating deliberate choices within constraints. Value reflection over reaction, authenticity over popularity. Recognize that freedom is practiced, not granted. Nietzsche, Epictetus, and Kant converge on a common truth. The human being is an agent capable of self-overcoming, even in the presence of external pressures. The algorithm is a force, not an inevitability. Rebuilding autonomy is a lifelong practice. It requires awareness of algorithmic influence, critical thinking, and media literacy, mindful engagement with digital tools, deliberate cultivation of intrinsic desires, collective awareness and ethical responsibility, technical literacy and control, reflection, pause, and unmediated experience. By integrating these practices, individuals reclaim agency in the digital age, cultivating a freedom that is both conscious and deliberate, resisting manipulation without renouncing technology itself. Algorithms shape behavior, influence culture, and compress choice, but human consciousness remains the ultimate frontier of autonomy. Philosophical insight, combined with intentional action, ensures that the algorithm does not determine who we are or what we become. In the next section, we will examine the future of human freedom, exploring how philosophy, technology, and society might converge to preserve autonomy in an increasingly algorithmic world. Section 11. The future of human freedom, coexisting with algorithms. As algorithms become increasingly sophisticated, their influence on individuals and society will continue to grow. They will anticipate desires, shape preferences, and curate experiences with unprecedented precision. Yet the question remains, Can humans coexist with these systems without surrendering freedom? The answer lies not in rejection, but in conscious integration, philosophical awareness, and ethical engagement. Algorithms as tools, not masters. The first principle is perspective. Algorithms are tools, powerful and pervasive, but not omnipotent. Their influence derives from human engagement, design choices, and data inputs. Philosopher Hannah Arendt argued that freedom is realized through thoughtful participation in the world. Similarly, autonomy in the algorithmic age depends on viewing technology as a partner, not a puppet master. By cultivating awareness, individuals can decide when to leverage algorithmic assistance for learning, creativity, or efficiency, and when to resist its influence. The goal is coexistence without submission. Augmented autonomy. The future may involve a model of augmented autonomy, using algorithms to expand rather than constrain freedom. For instance, algorithms could filter noise while preserving access to diverse perspectives. Personalized systems could suggest educational content aligned with conscious goals. Decision support tools could highlight options without dictating choice. In this vision, technology amplifies human agency instead of diminishing it. Autonomy becomes not the absence of influence, but the capacity to navigate influence deliberately. Nietzsche's philosophy is instructive here. He urged humans to overcome external pressures and internal impulses, transforming constraints into tools for self-expression. Algorithms could become part of this self-overcoming if consciously integrated into life. Ethical design and collective responsibility. Autonomy is not just an individual concern. The ethical design of algorithms is crucial for societal freedom. Philosophers and technologists alike argue that systems should be transparent, accountable, and aligned with human values. Principles of ethical algorithm design include transparency. Users understand how recommendations are generated. Consent and control. Individuals can customize engagement, privacy, and visibility. Diversity of exposure. Systems encourage cross-perspective engagement rather than echo chambers. Accountability. Designers are responsible for unintended societal consequences. As John Rawls emphasized, fairness in social institutions is foundational to justice. Algorithms, as new societal institutions, must respect these principles to preserve collective freedom. Education as the bedrock of future freedom. The future of autonomy depends on education that prioritizes critical thinking, digital literacy, and philosophical reflection. Schools and universities must teach citizens not only to use technology, but to understand its influence, question assumptions, and cultivate deliberate choice. Media literacy programs can expose the mechanics of recommendation systems. Philosophy courses can cultivate reflection on autonomy, desire, and responsibility. Collaborative projects can encourage ethical engagement with technology. As Plato argued, education shapes not only knowledge but character. In the algorithmic age, education is also the defense of freedom. The psychological dimension. Autonomy is not only intellectual but also psychological. Algorithms exploit attention, desire, and emotion, compressing the space between stimulus and response. Future human freedom requires practices that restore mental space. Mindfulness and meditation cultivate awareness of internal states. Cognitive strategies help resist impulsive engagement. Reflection and journaling reinforce deliberate decision-making. Epictetus's ancient wisdom remains relevant. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Autonomy is ultimately exercised in the space between perception and reaction, even when algorithms attempt to influence that space. Coexistence and adaptation. The future will not be a return to a pre-digital era. Algorithms will continue to evolve, shaping economies, culture, and society. Coexistence requires adaptation. Accepting influence without surrendering agency. Integrating tools that enhance understanding, creativity, and ethical reflection. Maintaining human oversight over systems that shape collective behavior. In essence, humans must cultivate algorithmic literacy as a core competency, understanding, interacting with, and when necessary, resisting technology. Philosophical resilience. Freedom in the algorithmic age is fragile but resilient. Philosophy provides tools to maintain this resilience. Socratic awareness, constant questioning of assumptions and influences. Stoic discipline, recognizing what is within our control and what is not. Nietzschean self-overcoming, transforming constraints into tools for self-actualization. Existential reflection, owning responsibility for choices within structured systems. These traditions converge on a central truth: freedom is practiced, not granted. Algorithms may shape the landscape, but humans shape themselves. The role of society. Individual awareness is insufficient without collective structures that safeguard freedom. Society must promote transparency and regulation of algorithmic systems, foster digital literacy and critical thinking from a young age, encourage ethical accountability in technology development, support platforms and systems designed to enhance agency rather than exploit attention. As Arendt noted, freedom is realized in shared spaces of responsibility and reflection. In the algorithmic age, societal structures must enable both individual and collective autonomy. The philosophical imperative. Ultimately, coexisting with algorithms demands a philosophical mindset. Accept influence without accepting domination. Pursue awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. Recognize that freedom is a practice, a responsibility, and an achievement. Use technology as a tool for self-expansion, not self-erasure. Nietzsche, Plato, Kant, and modern philosophers converge on this imperative. Human agency is never given. It must be constantly cultivated, defended, and exercised. The algorithm is powerful, pervasive, and predictive. It shapes desire, perception, and society. Yet freedom persists in the deliberate cultivation of awareness, reflection, and ethical action. The future of human autonomy is not the elimination of algorithms, but coexistence with conscious engagement. By integrating philosophical insight, technical literacy, and reflective practice, humans can preserve agency, reclaim the space between stimulus and response, and ensure that technology serves human values rather than determines them. As the philosopher Albert Camus wrote, "Freedom is nothing else but a chance to be better." In the algorithmic age, this chance is ours to seize, consciously, deliberately, and with full awareness of the shadows and light that shape our world. Section 12, Conclusion, Choosing Light in the Algorithmic Age. We began this journey with a question. Every recommendation, every suggestion, every video you watch, is it truly your choice, or are powerful algorithms subtly shaping your desires, your beliefs, even your perception of reality? The exploration has revealed a complex landscape. Algorithms influence attention, guide desire, shape perception, and even impact collective culture. They operate invisibly, adaptively, and pervasively, often creating the illusion of free will while subtly narrowing the horizon of authentic choice. Yet despite this influence, human freedom persists. It exists in the space between stimulus and response, the reflective pause that allows awareness, deliberation, and choice. Freedom is fragile, but it is neither imaginary nor irrelevant. It requires cultivation, courage, and ethical vigilance. The philosophical threads. Across history, philosophers have grappled with the limits and possibilities of autonomy. Plato urged the ascent from shadow to light, teaching that liberation requires recognition of illusion and active engagement with truth. Aristotle emphasized reason and virtue, reminding us that intentional action distinguishes the human from the merely reactive. Epictetus highlighted the power of perception and response, pointing to the inner freedom that persists even under external influence. Nietzsche called for self-overcoming, urging us to transform constraints into tools for authentic self-expression. Camus framed freedom as a struggle, a conscious endeavor to act meaningfully despite absurdity. In the age of algorithms, these insights remain deeply relevant. They remind us that freedom is not merely the absence of constraints, but the active practice of self-awareness, reflection, and ethical action. Individual autonomy, reclaiming choice. On the individual level, reclaiming autonomy requires deliberate practices. Awareness, recognizing algorithmic influence, understanding predictive systems, and observing emotional triggers. Critical thinking, questioning assumptions, evaluating sources, and cultivating intellectual independence. Mindful engagement, using technology intentionally rather than reactively, prioritizing value over compulsion. Deliberate desire, aligning actions with intrinsic goals and values rather than engineered prompts. Reflection and pause, creating mental space to observe, evaluate, and act consciously. Through these practices, the individual cultivates a resilient sense of agency, the ability to choose consciously, even amidst pervasive algorithmic influence. Collective autonomy, preserving society. Freedom is not only personal, it is collective. Algorithms shape culture, democracy, and social trust. Collective autonomy depends on transparency. Platforms and developers must disclose how algorithms operate. Ethical design. Technology should prioritize human values over engagement metrics. Education. Citizens must understand and critically engage with digital systems. Community practices. Shared norms that encourage reflection, accountability, and deliberate engagement. Society must cultivate structures that enable conscious participation, ensuring that collective belief, political discourse, and culture remain spaces of deliberation rather than manipulation. The future of coexistence. Algorithms will not disappear. They will grow smarter, more predictive, and more integrated into every aspect of life. Human freedom will not lie in rejection, but in conscious coexistence. Leveraging algorithms as tools to augment, not replace, human agency. Practicing digital literacy and critical reflection to navigate influence responsibly. Fostering ethical systems and transparent practices to safeguard collective autonomy. Freedom in the digital age is active, not passive. It requires awareness, discipline, and ethical vigilance, echoing the insights of both ancient and modern thinkers. The ultimate paradox. The algorithm presents a paradox. It magnifies choice while constraining agency, offering infinite content, yet narrowing authentic experience. Yet this paradox is also an opportunity. The very presence of influence demands reflection, choice, and awareness, the conditions for cultivating true freedom. Albert Camus captures this beautifully. Freedom is nothing else but a chance to be better. Algorithms may define the terrain, but the journey, the conscious, reflective, ethical navigation remains ours. Freedom is found not in the absence of influence, but in the deliberate exercise of awareness, choice, and integrity within it. Call to consciousness. As we navigate feeds, notifications, trending content, and digital echo chambers, the challenge is to remember that human consciousness remains the ultimate frontier. Awareness, reflection, and ethical action restore the space between stimulus and response, the space where autonomy thrives. The digital cave is compelling, seductive, and engineered to capture attention. But like Plato's prisoner ascending to the light, we can choose to look beyond shadows, recognize manipulation, and reclaim agency. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard reminds us, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. In the algorithmic age, despair may manifest as unconscious conformity, passive consumption, or unreflective belief. Conscious engagement is the path to selfhood, authenticity, and freedom. Closing reflection. The algorithm controls attention, predicts desire, and shapes society, but it cannot own consciousness. Freedom endures in the reflective human mind, in the moments of pause, the deliberate choices, and the ethical engagement that define our agency. We are not prisoners of technology, we are participants in a dynamic landscape, capable of awareness, reflection, and action. Algorithms may influence the world, but the choice to act deliberately, consciously, and ethically remains profoundly human. To live freely in the age of algorithms is to observe influence without surrendering to it. Reflect deeply on values, goals, and actions. Engage ethically with technology, society, and culture. Cultivate autonomy as a lifelong practice. In reclaiming these spaces of consciousness, humans can coexist with algorithms, not as slaves, not as passive participants, but as aware, deliberate, and responsible agents of their own lives. Final thought. Every recommendation, every suggestion, every video, and every notification presents a choice: to follow the path of passive engagement or to exercise reflective autonomy. The shadows on the digital wall are mesmerizing, but light remains. It requires courage, awareness, and deliberate action to step toward it. And when we do, we reclaim the most human of faculties, the power to choose freely, consciously, and ethically, even in a world designed to shape our choices. If this made you rethink your choices, hit like and subscribe to stay aware. Don't let algorithms control you. Join us in exploring truth, freedom, and the power of your mind.